Ladies, gentlemen, siblings, do not adjust your dial. Do not adjust your antenna. That's right. You have entered the Fright Lab. And welcome to the Fright Lab. I'm Lucas Yoakum. With me tonight, as always, is the only co-host who understands the overstimulated times we live in, Joseph Wren. How are we doing tonight, Joe?
The new flesh is strong with this one. I can't tell you that I'm not sore from all the crazy, spooky music the band and I made last night. So I'm really excited to finally be talking about one of my favorite Cronenberg films. In fact, the Cronenberg film that I knew of before I knew who David Cronenberg really was.
Fair.
Videodrome has a special place in my heart. It's one of the weird movies that people told me about, and I'm just going to continue my recovery process with a delicious latte and the new flesh.
Were you earlier trying to blend Darth Vader with Videodrome? The new flesh is strong with this one. Is that what you were doing? Am I right about that?
Shout out to the Nerf Herder Council. I can't say it wasn't a passing thought, as it were.
At least you're honest. So, I'm fascinated by the way that some films or filmmakers seem like oracles. Art is often at its best when it's talking about the moment when it was created. But it's genuinely magical when it tells you what is going to happen. And for my money, I think few filmmakers have been as talented at that as David Cronenberg. Most fans of this show are likely already aware of this man and his work, but for the uninitiated, who is David Cronenberg? In a previous episode, I described Cronenberg as the creator, probably best known for body horror, that particularly squick-inducing subgenre, known for when your body does all sorts of gross stuff that you don't want it to do. Cronenberg is extremely good at mixing just enough sexuality into that concept so it becomes extra distressing. But what isn't talked about in David Cronenberg's whole thing is his understanding of the world around him. Cronenberg is an astute commentator on the human condition and the way societies are always trying to shape or misshape the human condition. I think Cronenberg's latter films like A History of Violence, Eastern Promises, and A Dangerous Method are beautifully executed, if not a little uncomfortable, metaphors for life in the early to mid-2000s, and increasingly, points beyond. Interestingly, A History of Violence, Eastern Promises, and A Dangerous Method aren't really horror movies, much less body horror. A History of Violence and Eastern Promises are essentially crime dramas, albeit with an intensely Cronenbergian sense of cynicism and detachment around them. A Dangerous Method, on the other hand, is a brilliantly acted and filmed period drama surrounding the relationship of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. Now, I have to confess, I'm a little behind on Cronenberg's more recent outings like Maps of the Stars or Crimes of the Future. Alas, that is the burden of being a part-time film critic. However, the subject of tonight's discussion is one of my personal favorites. David Cronenberg's unnecessarily horny commentary on the media, 1983's Videodrome.
Unnecessarily horny indeed.
Come to me. Don't keep me waiting. Please.
Videodrome. The most provocative motion picture experience of our time. From David Cronenberg, the creator of Scanners. Starring James Woods and Deborah Harry. First, it controls your mind. Then, it destroys your body. Videodrome, coming soon.
I personally feel like
Universal Pictures.
that trailer does not summarize enough about this film in any way to prepare you for going to see it. Videodrome is arguably one of Cronenberg's most popular films, if not his best known. I would guess that Scanners and his remake of The Fly might be the most visible to more mainstream audiences. But there is something about Videodrome that just hits differently, you know? In a way, it sort of predicts another favorite, around these parts anyway, John Carpenter's masterpiece, They Live. But as you might imagine, there is something more going on with this movie, so as always, I want to pose a few questions. First, is Videodrome really about TV and the media? Next, is Videodrome an instance of Cronenberg being reactionary? And finally, has Videodrome aged well? But before we can really talk about these questions, we need to talk about the plot of Videodrome. So, follow us into this arena of the visual. Bring a raincoat. Things might get a little damp. Max Wren, played by James Woods, is a TV executive, at least in the same way that a butcher belongs in an operating theater. He runs Civic TV, which is like the fever dream local access channel us weirdos always thought we wanted. For him, the 1980s axiom, sex and violence sells, is as much an operating ethos as it is a lifestyle, or so it seems. It's hard to tell if Max is just jaded or if he just enjoys sleaze. These boundaries of his, few as they may seem, are about to be tested by Nikki Brand, a radio talk show host played by the one and only Debbie Harry. Nikki Brand is, well, Nikki is kinky in ways that Max only thinks he is. And they're both about to learn about those outer edges of experience when Max Signal Tech finds Videodrome. Seems like some sort of rogue signal from, well, somewhere else, somewhere foreign, somewhere scary. It seems like little more than broadcasted snuff films. Max, adorable little edgelord that he is, decides to show it to Nikki, and needless to say, she wants more. She decides to go find where Videodrome is coming from, and that means Max needs to go find it too. One of Max's insiders gives him a very pointed warning, one he almost assuredly does not listen to. And that warning, stay away from Videodrome. Because, quote, it has something that you don't have, Max. It has a philosophy, and that's what makes it dangerous, unquote. We'll steer away from spoilers for now, but I have to level with you. Spoiling Videodrome is sort of hard on a few levels. To start, it is one of the most quintessential Cronenberg movies, especially of his 1980s output. More than any other of his flicks, I think it's a quintessentially 1980s horror movie writ large. To me, it feels very 1980s in terms of subject matter. Resultantly, I think that many of the big beats of the movies, or I don't know, maybe just its more graphic scenes, are practically mimetic at this point. They might not be iconic as the exploding head in Scanners, but they have a gruesome staying power. And for the record, that's not taking away anything from the exploding head in Scanners. It is classic. But this one's different. Throughout Videodrome's runtime, there is this persistent, nagging sort of question. Just what is Cronenberg talking about with this movie? Given the era, it's easy to say, well, he's clearly decrying violence in the media at the time. Moreover, it's tempting to point out that the old idea of TV rotting your mind. You know, as a child, I was told more than once that sitting too close to the TV was damaging my eyes, let alone what it might be doing to my brain. And in previous episodes, we've talked about the persistent comment that violent or sexually charged media is making more people more violent and more sexually active. Is any of that true? Well, That's a very messy subject. I spent a somewhat long time reading about this subject across a handful of sources. Now, I am not a scientist, nor am I a researcher within a university or hospital context, so I confess that my resources here were somewhat limited. I will, of course, share the clearest and most pointed texts into the show notes. It's also worth saying that I read a number of papers across a span of multiple decades of research. There is an article from the journal Adolescent Health, which was published in 2007, and it states that there is a causal link between violent media and violent behavior in adolescent subjects. However, a 2013 article from the APA gives us the following comment. It is a touch long, but I want to read it in full. Quote, a 2010 review by psychologist Craig A. Anderson and others concluded that the evidence strongly suggests that exposure to violent video games is a causal risk factor for increased aggressive behavior, aggressive cognition, and aggressive affect, and for decreased empathy and pro-social behavior. Anderson's earlier research showed that playing violent video games can increase a person's aggressive thoughts, feelings, and behavior both in laboratory settings and in daily life. One major conclusion from this and other research on violent entertainment media is that content matters, says Anderson. Other researchers, including psychologist Craig J. Ferguson, have challenged the position that video game violence harms children. While his own 2009 meta-analytic review reported results similar to Anderson's, Ferguson contends that laboratory results have not translated into real-world, meaningful effects. He also claims that much of the research into video game violence has failed to control for other variables, such as mental health and family life, which may have impacted the results. His work found that children who are already at risk may be more likely to play violent video games. According to Ferguson, these other risk factors, as opposed to the games, cause aggressive and violent behavior. This is, admittedly, not very helpful for saying that violent media definitively does or does not make people violent. An article from the psychology outlet Very Well Mind does a good job of offering context for this subject. That website, by the way, has articles written by people in the field and appears to be peer-reviewed. It is not some wellness influencer out there just talking out of their ass. And as the article goes, more specifically, it offers context about the lack of context. Here again, the comment is a bit long, but it is incredibly helpful. Quote, so if there's so much research evidence for a link between media violence and real-world aggression, why is the debate over this topic ongoing? Part of the issue is one of definition. Studies often define violence and aggression in very different ways, and they use different measures to test the association, making it hard to replicate the results. Moreover, many researchers edit together media for lab experiments, creating a situation where participants must watch and react to media that bears minimal resemblance to anything they'd actually consume via TV, movies, or the internet, unquote. Sounds a little A Clockwork Orange, doesn't it? Maybe that description is a little hyperbolic, but I don't think it's too far off the mark. The point I'm trying to make is that this issue feels more like a culture war hot potato than anything else. In the absence of standardized scientific methodology or terminology, what can we actually learn here? I think that Videodrome is talking about something more specific, and in a way, sort of predicts what was coming next. Online radicalization. Cronenberg couldn't have predicted the spread of the internet, nor could he have foreseen the ways that the internet would mutate and change, and, in turn, how it would help mutate and change people as well. And for the record, this isn't me saying, internet bad, bleh. I'm not that much of a hypocrite. But what I am saying is that you do have to think for a second about the presence of mass shootings in the United States. I'm going to include two easy-to-read articles, one from the BBC and one from CNN. Both have good links to more rigorous sources on the matter. In 2024, there was over 500 mass shootings. The BBC article also points out this bone-chilling little stat. Quote, For each of the last 4 years, there has been more than 600 mass shootings, almost 2 a day on average, unquote. Here again, I am no expert. I think you should defer to people who have done the serious research around these topics, and I have included several jump-off points if you are interested in following up on this subject. One of the links includes a report from the ADL, and they make a great point. Quote, every year, extremists in the U.S. are involved in terrorist plots and acts, armed standoffs, shootouts with the police, hate crimes, scams and cons, threats and harassment, and a wide variety of other criminal acts, unquote. While that might not be as direct as saying a mass shooting, it's worth saying that the sort of extremist terror this country has many grim faces and many forms. And in order to overcome that, we may need to escape this arena of violence and grow into some new form. A new flesh, if you will. More on that in a minute. Videodrome is endlessly quotable, like all Cronenberg movies. There are 2 bits of dialogue that summarize the issue of televised violent radicalization. So, spoilers ahead for a 40-year-old movie?
The next section of the Fright Lab contains spoilers for the film Videodrome. If you want to find out what the new flesh is really about, skip forward to 21 minutes and 18 seconds.
During the course of Max Wren's big screen adventure, he meets and works with a lot of interesting characters, one of which is the masterfully named pastor of the Cathode Ray Ministry, Brian Oblivion. He tells us, quote, the battle for the mind of North America will be fought in the video arena, the Videodrome. The television screen is the retina of the mind's eye. Therefore, the television screen is part of the physical structure of the brain. Therefore, whatever appears on the television screen emerges as raw experience for those who watch it. Therefore, television is reality, and reality is less than television. This encapsulates the entirety of the film's plot. The Videodrome signal is not just some sickos making snuff films and broadcasting it. They are using it to damage and corrupt its viewers. Videodrome is actually a movement, an agenda, threatening to uproot the current social order for some nefarious purpose. Max Wren has been used by the agents of Videodrome to spread their terrible power, and they have been using the people Max trusts most. One of which is his assistant, Harlan, the video signal tech I was talking about earlier. That second bit of dialogue that is so effective. He says, quote, North America's getting soft, Patron, and the rest of the world is getting tough. Very, very tough. We're entering savage new times, and we're going to have to be pure and direct and strong if we're going to survive them. Now you and this cesspool you call a television station and your people who wallow around inside of it, your viewers who watch what you do, they're rotting us away from the inside. We intend to stop that rot. End quote. Sounds a little Hitlerian, huh? The agents of Videodrome might not be goose-stepping down the street, but they intend on bending the world to their vision of these things. Brian Oblivion, on the other hand, proposes another point. His exposure to the Videodrome signal changed him biologically. He and his daughter, Bianca Oblivion, offer Max a simple approach and a slogan to aid in the fight. The slogan is, for my money, one of the best and most frightening lines in horror cinema. Death to Videodrome. Long live the new flesh. Oh, yeah, and because this is a Cronenberg joint, they give him this new approach and slogan in the same way that Videodrome did, through a vagina-like orifice in the center of his chest that they load with Betamax tapes. Yeah, it is that kind of movie. Just a quick reminder, we are watching Cronenberg do his thing.
I'm being so patient. I cannot wait for you to answer all of your own questions so that I can ask a few of my own.
Sure.
This is one of those times where the body horror, and we're going to talk about what we think the body horror is saying a little bit later on, body horror as a concept. But in the case of Videodrome, is this like a Jacob's Ladder, Silent Hill situation where the absurdity of the body horror is supposed to be in his head, even though it's not?
The idea is a hallucinatory thing. He's just imagining the chest vagina with the Betamax tapes. I don't know. And I think the ambiguity of it is one of the more powerful things about it. I like to think he actually has an orifice in his chest that oozes and eats tapes. But I also see the other reading of it, right? I see how you could look at it and say, no, he's clearly just, this signal's fucked up his head. He's clearly losing his mind. And now he's just imagining all of this terrible stuff. Which, okay, sure. But I want to argue a point that, again, we learn early on that he's not as weird and twisted and kinky as he thinks he is. And that if that's the case, how did his brain come up with chest sphincter? Terrible, terrible turn of phrase. I hope I never have to use that ever again.
Remind me to send you a Gilbert Gottfried scene from a roast a few years ago.
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thank you.
My thoughts on body horror, and this can be Cronenberg in general. What is the purpose of the body horror? Generally speaking, body horror is there to give you a sense of violation that we talk about in other ways in different films. We've talked about Maniac on this show. The first-person view of that film and of the remake, yes, that is supposed to make you feel uncomfortable because the horror is in front of your eyes and you can't look away. So body horror can be about the mind being corrupted, expanded, contracted. It can be about parasites. It can be about disease. It can be about mental health, or it can be about the people around you who are truly evil. You mentioned a very Hitlerian concept earlier. I think that's the purpose of the body horror. We just lump it in a bit with the surrealism, and we lose sight of it because now anytime it seems weird, the question becomes, well, did it really happen or was it in his head? So both readings make sense. I think when I watch Videodrome, I like your view that the Videodrome signal is corrupting, not just mentally, but also physically.
Well, I have to issue a quick correction before we go forward, because I know we'll hear about it later if we don't. The first Maniac, the Lustig Maniac, actually is not in the first person. Actually, it's only the remake with Elijah Wood that's in first person. My pedantry aside, I think you brought up the idea that it's right in front of you and you can't look away. You're looking at it through the eyes of the antagonist, I guess. So you can't look away. Well, I would argue it's a level deeper than that, actually. It's not you're looking at it through this person's eyes so you can't look away. It's that you have this person's eyes. You have no choice. And, you brought up this idea of violation. Body horror is a violation. All horror on some level is about violation, is about betrayal, Most of us are never going to be killed by a serial killer. I've cited statistics in many episodes that explain that that's just not a thing that happens most of the time. But if you were to be murdered by a serial killer, it would be a pretty substantial violation of your day-to-day life. Horror comes from that space, I suspect. Worse still, body horror deals with that violation of the flesh, with the betrayal of your flesh. The one thing you should be able to count on. Sure, a lot of people at some point in their life will experience something like cancer. It sucks and it's terrible and it's monstrous, but it is a very human experience. Most of us are never going to have a giant man-fly vomit acid onto us and burn off one of our limbs. Most of us aren't going to become giant man-flies, thankfully. I suspect that the reason body horror works, and I'm going to talk about this here in a second a little further, is that body horror attacks the most fundamental thing. You have your identity and you have your body, and if either of those are violated, it gets especially fucking icky very, very quickly. So, to answer our second question, I don't think that Videodrome is necessarily an instance of Cronenberg being a reactionary. I do think that he very accurately predicted many of the coming threats to our society. He didn't offer much of a functional solution to these issues, but I also don't turn to David Cronenberg movies for morality any more than I would turn to him for relationship advice, if you follow me. With that said, has Videodrome aged well? I am a sucker for creative, practical effects. Make it goopy, slimy, cadaverous, or, well, just plain icky. And I am likely to have a good time. Videodrome has all of that in spades. It's also gritty in a way that doesn't really happen anymore. The 80s were a hard decade in many regards, and this movie makes it look that way. Videodrome looks like its decade. So, in that regard, no, it doesn't look timeless and perfect now. But in terms of subject matter, of brutality, of mind-bending head-fucking terror, Videodrome delivers in ways that most modern films just can't. The only film that comes close to it, I think, is Possessor, a 2020 film directed by Brandon Cronenberg, the son of David Cronenberg. The spike and ooze-covered apple doesn't fall from the fleshy, horrific tree in this case. Videodrome is, like so many other good horror movies, a warning and a prediction. The world has gotten hard and tough in ways that I don't think many of us saw coming. The good news, however, is that it's not all doom and gloom. The internet might be creating a small army of ideological, or worse still, non-ideological terrorists. But it's also unifying communities and allowing people to talk to each other. It allows us to see the cold, hard facts and research, much like I shared with you all today. I really do encourage you to read the items I shared in the notes. They're interesting to see, and not to get all after-school special about this subject. I think we need to point out how much people need communities. People need to know that others care about them. If you want to keep people out of the awful, radicalizing spaces online that exist and are not that hard to find, give them real-world kindness and help.
I liked the word you used earlier, predictions. Where do you stand on how this film predicted the issues of the following 40 years? Videodrome might be the first. I haven't checked. But it's not the last film that is critical of the media. It's not even only done in horror. That was one of the major themes of RoboCop, was this television, this screen, this box that was overwhelming your senses and getting you to go out and spend money. I'm reminded of the series Black Mirror. It's the most recent example I have. In 2011, there was an episode called 15 Million Merits. And the plot centers around a man who is trying to help a woman get onto a singing talk show. And in this world, everybody rides stationary bikes, seemingly to generate power for the society. Think The Matrix, only we're not all asleep. And they get their credits. So if you want to eat, you got to ride the bike. If you want to watch TV, you got to ride the bike. And one of the overwhelming themes is the constant bombardment of advertisements. Now, that's a commentary on the present day, and it very much predicted some of the overwhelming stimulation of social media, in my opinion. But it's a very similar theme. It's a very similar thought. Where do you stand with this? Was Cronenberg just ahead of the game and he made a solid prediction? Or is this one of those topics that we have to keep reminding ourselves of so that we do not become overwhelmed by it? Videodrome, the concept, can attack your mind. There's something about that. But I've also read that study you mentioned where we don't have any hard evidence, but we have some strong implication that this is just the visualization of someone who already had a problem.
So, oh man, this is such a complicated subject. I want to kind of like start at the beginning of your thinking and just kind of go through it. For the record, I think Cronenberg was very much ahead of his time, but I'm not sure if you had asked him in, say, I don't know, 1992, if he would have said, yeah, this is that I was exactly dead on right. I knew what I was talking about then and there.
I saw this coming. That's why I made the movie.
Right, precisely. And I think if you were to get him to say that, you would then say, okay, then explain Crash, because I've never gotten horny watching a car accident. So, and listen, I love the movie Crash, but let's get very real. It is the quintessential uncomfortable watch. There is no way to watch that movie that will ever make you feel good inside. And if by some strange chance watching that makes you feel good inside, first of all, no judgments. Everybody enjoys their own thing, I guess. But if you could email us at thefrightlabpodcast@gmail.com, I just want to ask you one question. Why? And for the record, it will only be through email. I'm absolutely not giving you my fucking phone number or my address. Holy crap. Anyway, and like Black Mirror is such an interesting example because it almost feels cliche now, right? The first episode of Black Mirror, the one with the pig head, or the one with the pig, remember? Yeah, you remember. Let's not forget that only a couple of years later, one of the scandals that dethroned a British prime minister was him having some sort of allegedly immoral congress with the severed head of a pig. Like, straight the fuck up out of Black Mirror. It is right there, It almost feels cliche because I think we all know on some level how ridiculous and ubiquitous the internet has become. Like, if a good example of something I dealt with recently, I fell down a rabbit hole of pocket knives. I've always just had a thing for pocket knives. I just enjoy them. So I bought a few. I did some research. I found good brands. I found some stuff I liked. But now I can't get away from pocket knife ads. Or if you find yourself looking up how to change a car tire on YouTube, you will be inundated with car tire ads for the next 6 months. It got to a point where I cracked a joke to someone about a ridiculous children's song I had overheard. And they said, well, you should pull it up on YouTube. And I said, absolutely fucking not. I am not ruining my search algorithm that way. Yeah, I mean, I think Cronenberg, I don't know if he saw it coming. I think he just smelled it on the wind, Like, let's look at The Fly for a minute. The Fly is classic Cronenberg. Maybe his like most popular or maybe his best known, and for good reason. It's an excellent flick. I think he saw coming the sort of wild stuff people were trying with technology, and this is always kind of true. I mean, yeah, we credit Nikola Tesla for a lot of really amazing ideas that were way ahead of his time, but he also had some pretty bizarre ideas about like wireless electricity that were just way too far in advance. And there's always quack science, right? I mean, at one point in time, marathon runners were given arsenic in the middle of marathons in an attempt to like boost their performance, which I guess it didn't work. I'm going to go on the record and say maybe don't take poisons when you're trying to run a marathon.
Or ever.
Like, just avoid. If there's one thing you can take away from the Fright Lab is Lucas tells you maybe don't take known poisons. Just don't do that. And like you have to be on the bike in the Black Mirror episode. You've got to ride the bike to earn credits to get anything. There's commentary there about the ubiquity of advertising. There's commentary there about our ongoing energy crises in the world, about the idea of social credit scores. And there are people, by the way, who are way better educated about me and have way more direct experience with these things. I can't recommend one of my favorite YouTube channels enough, Tor's Cabinet of Curiosities. A delightfully weird human being holding forth about subjects that he has a great deal of passion and interest in. He lived in China apparently at one point, so he did a whole episode on, yes, there are social credit scores, but you don't really understand them because you're not in the culture. So there is, and for the record, that's not me endorsing that either. I'm just saying there are actual resources out there explaining this stuff. I feel like, modern media is always going to talk about modern times on some level, but it's very, very difficult to accurately assess the future. I think a few artists historically have really gotten it right. George Orwell, 1984. Sure, we don't live in that, thankfully, but he made a lot of observations about how propaganda works and how, frankly, no one is actually immune to propaganda. So, yeah, I mean, I think Cronenberg really did predict a lot of stuff. And, as the media gets weirder and darker and stranger and more invasive and more pervasive and more ubiquitous, I don't think we're going to get away from it. I think everyone here knows what a fan I am of movies. I love going to the movie theater. And it's a struggle for me going to a mainstream theater. Think your larger houses that are showing, your bigger budgeted films, not your indie art house stuff. There's a solid 45 minutes of commercials before most movies. And it used to not be that way. And yeah, I get it. You're going to make the argument that, well, movie previews before a movie are a commercial. And yeah, that's absolutely right. But at least it makes sense, right? I don't need a GMC ad right before watching a Robert Eggers film. That doesn't make any sense to me. And to make matters worse, there was that period, in the early 2000s where there were straight up ads in the middle of movies. What was the name of that? Oh, The Island with Ewan McGregor and Scarlett Johansson. Great movie with like Xbox and Pepsi ads kind of dead center of the film. Like not just a little bit of clever product placement. Like, no, it was right the fuck there. Blade 3, maybe the weakest of the Blade films. Not that they were exactly works of art in the first place, but, the weakest of the three had 2 iPod ads right in the middle of it. It was, thankfully, it's not quite that bad right now, but the ubiquity of ad space in fucking everything, it's just exhausting. And it makes it a little harder to enjoy art in some ways. And thankfully, the one good thing we do have with the amount of publicly available everything is that it is a little easier to get away from it if you don't want to be around it. You can't fully escape it. I don't mean to sound all Guy Debord all of a sudden, but that's not how spectacle works. You're not allowed to escape it fully. But it is there, and there are ways to minimize it and how it impacts you and affects you. Going back to what I was saying earlier, I really do believe if we want to stop stuff like online radicalization, we've got to take a long, hard look at ourselves as a culture and say, why the fuck are people doing this in the first place? We don't want to answer that because we have to then admit like, oh, we kind of fucked up in some places, didn't we? We totally replaced everybody's natural, organic, locally occurring communities with online, online spaces like Facebook. Let's just call it what it is. But also stuff like making us work 40 hours a week. It's hard to have those long-term relationships with your coworkers, especially if you don't particularly enjoy your job, We've put a price tag on fucking everything. There's very little free open space. There's very little commons in the sense of we have a common community space. Like, yeah, I'm lucky to live in a neighborhood with a lot of park space, but a lot of people aren't. And that's, I think, bad for us because even if you're not having long conversations with everyone at the park, you are surrounded by what is probably your neighbors. I don't want to use the Fright Lab as like my own personal soapbox, any more than it already is. But I just think that the answers are all there, ultimately. So was Cronenberg predicting something? I mean, I wouldn't call him the Oracle of Delphi. He's entirely too interested in meat. He's entirely too interested in the body and what to do wrong with it. I heard him in an interview say once that he was the guy who killed the sexual revolution. And I'm not entirely sure that's wrong. So, yeah. With that, my siblings, what do you think? Has Videodrome aged well? And what other Cronenberg joints should I hit for the series? Should I do Crash? Do I have to do Crash? Ugh.
You should probably do Crash.
Oh, God. Oh, anyway, you should let us know by contacting us at thefrightlabpodcast@gmail.com. We can be found on basically all social media platforms at this point. Just search for The Fright Lab. We're easy to find. Joe, can you tell our audience where they can find your other projects?
If you are a fan of all things heavy metal, you should be listening to all the podcasts we are creating at discussmetal.com. We talk about heavy metal subjects, your favorite bands, my favorite bands. Dr. Scott and the Dammit Janets are making some spooky rock and roll, and you can find out everything about that band at thedammitjanets.com. Discord.thefrightlab.com. That is where this conversation is continuing. Unless you're the kind of person that wants to reach out on Threads or Blue Sky, or send us an email. You heard Lucas say it, thefrightlabpodcast@gmail.com. If this is your first episode, if this is the first time you've listened to The Fright Lab, welcome. I hope you enjoyed it. There's much more to come, and there's so much that's come before. If this is not your first episode, thank you for listening. What I need from you right now is take out your phone, scroll to the left, the right, find the place where you can give the thumbs up or the 5-star review. Leave us a comment. Let us know how we're doing and what you want to hear from the Fright Lab. Is there a horror movie subject or a horror movie that we haven't talked about that you really want to know what Lucas and Joe are thinking about it? Let us know. Again, the Fright Lab Podcast at gmail.com. Lucas.
Yes, sir.
Please tell everyone how much we love independent artists and independent media.
You know, there is one thing that is absolutely true about this sort of work, is you never really realize how little you actually know until you really start listening to people who do. I feel very lucky. I've had a lot of opportunities because of this show to talk to people involved in indie art and indie media. We did a fantastic interview way back, well, not way back, about 10 episodes back, I guess, with Dusty Gannon of one of my favorite bands, Vision Video. We've also interviewed directors and actors, and we've had the opportunity to talk to other podcasters about their work and what they're doing. And I've got to tell you, if you believe in indie media the way I do, you know that that's where the good stuff is happening. So if you are involved in some sort of indie project, be that a podcast, a band, and I don't care what type of music it is it horror country, horror punk, horror hip hop? I don't care. You need to let us know, and you can reach out to us at thefrightlabpodcast@gmail.com or find us on social media and hip us to the good stuff that we don't know about yet. And, as always, the Fright Lab Podcast is written by me, Lucas Yoakum. My co-host and producer is the one and only Joseph Wren. We appreciate each and every one of you, and we will talk to you all again very soon.
That's Fright Lab for you.
Studies often define violence and aggression. Aggression? Aggression is a country. Aggression is a country. He didn't offer any functional solutions to these issues, but I also don't burn to David Cronenberg. Fuck. Let's try that again.
So, Lucas, are you excited for episode 50 coming in a few weeks?
Episode 50. I mean, the only thing I have to say to that is, death to Videodrome! Long live the new flesh! I've always wanted an opportunity to do that. Sadly, I can't do it while wearing a Harrington jacket, waving a gun around.